It's time to laugh, to win, and to live the thrill of the action.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. What the hell's going on out here?
No idea what's going on, but I am excited.
Every pick, every play, every game-changing moment.
Unbelievable!
This is You Better You Bet, brought to you by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
And it is a great day to be alive on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos today on You Better You Bet. And we've got a lot to get to. We've got wild card games to talk about. College football playoff semifinals. Guys who probably aren't worth much asking for trades and teams helping them out. Breaking news in that college football playoff field regarding coaching staffs. Yes, the saga continues in Oxford, Mississippi, which is relocated out west for the Fiesta Bowl, at least for this week. A lot to get to, coming to you from the confluence, as they say, of the three rivers in western Pennsylvania. Yes, I am a Yinzer. No, I don't have the Mike McCarthy accent. But if you just want me to talk like that for the next 3 hours, that's on you. We've got a lot to get to, as I said. Nick will be back tomorrow. We've still got you covered with everything going on, including a visit from Derek Rackley of Westwood One, who will be on the call of Patriots Chargers alongside Tom McCarthy on Sunday night. And why not get into it with the 5 biggest stories of the day right off the top? Let's do it.
5.
60 yards from Daniel Carlson for the late lead. Snap there. Snap there. Carlson swings.
That's it. That's the peak for the Raiders this year. Chris Lewis on the call on CBS of Daniel Carlson's 60-yard field goal to win an ugly, meaningless game against the Mahomes-less Chiefs on Sunday afternoon. They'll go into 2026 with a new coach. Pete Carroll relieved of his duties yesterday. Carroll, not the only coach to catch a pink slip on Black Monday. Jonathan Gannon in Arizona. Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland both got the axe yesterday as well, on the heels of Raheem Morris getting canned Sunday night in Atlanta. Now, with openings already existing with the Giants and the Titans, here's a question for you, though. Where are all the up-and-coming head coaching candidates coming from in this year's offseason cycle? All the names out there are retreads. Matt Nagy, Stefanski, Brian Flores. There's the LaFleur and a Kubiak out there as well. That's Mike, the Rams OC, and Clint, the Seahawks OC, respectively. So, I don't know. Maybe you just need the right surname in this year's coaching cycle. But I got bad news if you're the fan of a team thinking that a new head coach is going to set your franchise on the right path. There aren't any Ben Johnsons or Mike McDonalds out there this year. Anybody looking for a young, up-and-coming coaching mind burning up Mike McCarthy's or Bill Belichick's phone right now? Yeah, I didn't think so. And like I said, as a fellow Yinzer, I'm obligated by blood to tell you that if this were about hanging out, talking ball, I'd love to do so with McCarthy. Maybe one of the few people who could translate that accent, but he's not taking one of these rudderless teams and suddenly sending them to the Super Bowl in a few years. And here's the worst news. If your team is also entering the quarterback market, the outlook isn't much better. Could be worse, actually. You're going to give up draft compensation to hitch your wagon to Tua Tagovailoa or Kyler Murray? Good luck. Going to bring in Malik Willis and see if he's more than just a backup again. Good luck with that. Then again, maybe those are better options than an overinflated draft class that's going to try and convince you Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore are worth top 5 picks. If you need a head coach or a quarterback, this may be the worst possible offseason to be in the market for either one of those. And we'll get into that in greater detail in about 15 minutes. Next.
4.
4.2. Down by 2. Jalen to get it in. They look, and here's Trey. He goes to the top. He drives. He puts it up. It's no good.
Bob Rathman on FanDuel Sportsnet Southeast. That's just a couple weeks ago. Trae Young throwing up an off-balance prayer at the buzzer in a 152-150 home loss to the Chicago Bulls. Yeah, the Hawks scored 150 at home and lost. You know why? Because of Trae Young. Because he's a defensive liability. Because he's shooting a career-low 30% from beyond the three-point line. The Hawks are just 2-8 with Trae Young on the floor this season. 15-12 without him. Atlanta doesn't need Trae Young. And here's the problem. In the wake of yesterday's news that the Hawks are working with Young's representatives on a trade, no one needs a Trae Young. Unless you're a young cellar dweller looking to burn cap space over the next couple of years. Yeah, I see you, Washington Wizards. Nobody needs a ball-hogging defensive liability who hit his peak while playing horse during COVID. In 7 seasons with the guy who was supposed to be their savior, the Atlanta Hawks have won 1 Southeast Division title and finished above the play-in line once that same year. And that's 5 years in the rearview mirror. They're perennially just, well, there, right around 500 all the time because Trae Young is perennially just, well, there. In a world where you just need your stars to post up from 33 feet and chuck a dozen moon balls every night, Trae Young might still have some use, but this isn't 2016. It's now 2026. And if you want to go anywhere, in the East especially, you better be able to play some defense. You better be able to drive to the hole. You better be able to do more than roll off picks and take 22-foot jumpers over and over and over again. Trae Young's usefulness has been usurped by Jalen Johnson in Atlanta. And really, until he shows more willingness to reform his game from the hot young shooter archetype that was still in style when he came into the league, it's been usurped by more complete guards around the NBA. Teams want more Brunson and less Trae Young. And the problem for the Hawks is the rest of the NBA knows this. According to some, even the Wizards are asking for draft compensation in return for taking Trae Young in a deal. So the Hawks will move on from Young at some point in the next month. The trade deadline is February 6th, 30 days away, and be better for it. And Young will play out the year plus remaining on his deal, either transforming his game into something that could be useful to modern contenders or more than likely flame out. Next.
3.
Tyler Luke from 44. Snap good. Hold it. The kick is no good. It is wide right. And the Steelers are the champions of the North.
Mike Tirico on NBC Sunday night. An insane end to the 2025 NFL regular season has given us what a lot of us thought was probably fairly improbable, if not impossible, 4 months ago. And some of you may still think that. The possibility of an Aaron Rodgers Cinderella run to cap off a Hall of Fame career. Not that any of you are actually rooting for that. Outside of Steelers fans and Rodgers sycophants, nobody is rooting for a team to get their 7th Lombardi trophy, right? The same way no one outside of New England is rooting for the Patriots, and no one outside of Philly is rooting for the Eagles or their fans. Some teams, they're just too easy to hate and root against. And then there are the darlings, right? Happens every year around this time. 14 teams go to the playoffs. 18 fan bases are left looking around like the John Travolta meme going, who do we root for now? The teams that everyone whose team has already been eliminated will root for? I mean, at the top of the list, it's the Buffalo Bills, right? Hell, I saw a survey yesterday that showed even 40+% of Chiefs fans are rooting for the Bills. Maybe that's a big brother, little brother situation, and the only one that's allowed to beat him up is you. But anyway, it's got to be the Bills, right? Who else is high on your list of teams you'd like to see go on a run? I'm looking for your comments, by the way, in the YouTube chat. Just search the BetMGM network and look for You Better You Bet. Who's the team you're rooting for if your team is out of it? An unlikely dog like Carolina? That's not going to last long. The always snake-bitten Chargers? It's hard to root for a Harbaugh. Is anyone dying to root for the oh-so-cuddly Sean Payton? I mean, look, if it were King of Queens, Kevin James' version of Sean Payton from that terrible movie they made a couple years ago about the Saints, maybe. The Rams, been there, done that, right? Maybe Seattle? You want to root for Sam Darnold? The young up-and-coming Texans? Who are the darlings of the general public who don't otherwise have a rooting interest in these playoffs? Again, I'd love to open up this conversation to you, and we'll do just that in about 35 minutes. Next.
2.
How would you describe the turnaround and what you've been able to build in a short period of time?
It'd be a hell of a movie.
Kurt Signetti with Reese Davis on ESPN and ABC during the Rose Bowl post-game trophy presentation and celebration. Undefeated and out of nowhere in just 2 years, the Indiana Hoosiers have become the favorites to win the national championship. And given Signetti's ability to attract talent, and don't forget what he did at JMU before landing in Bloomington, there's little reason to believe this is just a blip on the radar for the Hoosiers. Oregon's found itself again over the last few years under Dan Lanning as a force on the national stage. They didn't really dip that much. Miami, they're always going to be the U, right? But let's recognize they had just one double-digit win season between 2003 and 2024. And Ole Miss has somehow pushed aside all the noise over their coaching staff, including breaking news this morning about some of their assistants supposedly coming back into the fold for this game when we thought they'd be out. And they've managed to retain now Kwan Lacey and apparently Trinidad Chambliss as well. I, for one, love it. Give me the novelty of programs who've never been in this position before, or at the very least, haven't been in a long time. This is the beauty of the expanded college football playoff. I know if you're in Athens or Columbus or Tuscaloosa, you'd love to believe that it's your birthright to be in title contention and still be playing football this late in the season. But, like I said earlier about familiar logos in the NFL playoffs, you're just too easy to hate. I'm sorry. Too easy to root against. And I love that you guys aren't around. I love that folks in Oxford and Bloomington are getting to revel in this experience. Because every time someone moans and complains and whines, college football is dying, I have to wonder if what they're really talking about is their anger at the fact that things are different now, or they're just butthurt that different means their favorite team isn't in it right now. It's why we love the NCAA basketball tournament and March Madness. I know this comparison has been made ad nauseum, but it's true. Because in March Madness, for every Kansas, there's a Loyola. For every Duke, there's a George Mason. For every UConn, there's an FAU. And the idea of someone jumping up and snatching the brass ring who hasn't been there before keeps us enthralled in the endless possibilities. They can do it. Maybe I can do it. Maybe my team can do it someday. So why do some people hate that idea existing in college football? Why? Oh, that's right. Because it might mean your team doesn't benefit from the advantage of being the established bully on the block. So this is a new wave of powerhouses we're seeing built right before our eyes. Is that a possibility? Specifically in the case of Indiana and Ole Miss? Are these teams going to be back in this spot a year from now? I mean, in Signetti's case, like I said, there's no reason to believe they won't be. Ole Miss has a lot more going on, but some of the key pieces coming back. But if this is a changing of the guard in college football, who's most likely to be the team that vaults to the head of the line and becomes a presumptive annual national title contender? Much the way Georgia, Alabama, Clemson a few years ago, and Ohio State has been for the past decade. And do we prefer it this way? I know I do, with new blood surfacing in the biggest games of the year at the most important time? Or do we want the same old crusty teams over and over and over again? We'll get into that, plus that breaking Ole Miss news at the top of the hour at 10 Eastern. Next.
1.
Fake to Corum. Stafford end zone. Touchdown. Second today for Parkinson.
That's Matt Stafford. Kenny Albert on Fox on the call. One of 2, 3, maybe 4 quarterbacks who we'd look at in this NFL postseason and say, yeah, That's your prototypical Super Bowl winning quarterback there, alongside Josh Allen, right? Those are the definites. Yeah, that's Super Bowl pedigree right there. And maybe Drake May, right? Hell of a second season. Brock Purdy, he's been there. Those are the guys you look at and see some championship level work this season. But look at the rest of the field. Aaron Rodgers is 42. Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams are all unproven, especially at this time of year. You could say the same about Bo Nix and C.J. Stroud, and they've been powered by their defenses as much as their own arms. Justin Herbert's playoff resume resembles the remnants of a baby's blown-out diaper. Jalen Hurts and Sam Darnold are always a gnat's eyelash away from a meltdown. Jordan Love just a year removed from a playoff meltdown of his own. No Mahomes. No Burrow. No Lamar. Not even a Goff. The playoff field is fairly devoid of big-name quarterbacks who can throw a team on their back and drag them kicking and screaming to playoff or even Super Bowl success. And look, it happens some years where your Super Bowl champ wins on the back of its defense, forcing turnovers, giving their offense short fields, and not asking the quarterback to do too much. We don't like to remember these instances because, well, it's not very palatable to our offensive-loving brains. But it happens once every 8 to 10 years, right? Go back and look at the history of Super Bowl champions. Nick Foles, Joe Flacco, Brad Johnson, who played Rich Gannon in that game, Trent Dilfer a couple years before that. And this may very well be another one of those years where crusty old farts can wobble on their bar stool and slur, defense wins championships, you know, and actually play the part of the blind squirrel finding the nut. No, not the easy E version. You get your mind out of the gutter. 10 of the top 12 defenses in points allowed are in the NFL playoffs. And only one defense in the bottom half in points allowed made the postseason. Bears, who are 23rd. Maybe even more importantly, the top 6 teams in takeaways are all in the tournament. If ever there were going to be an outlier year for the league built on quarterbacks, this feels like it could be the one. Apologies to Josh Allen and the Bills and Matt Stafford and the Rams and maybe even Purdy and the Niners and May and the Patriots, all of whom are on teams you're probably not rooting for unless you got that soft spot for the Bills that I mentioned earlier. We've got a lot to get into today. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos here on Westwood One Sports with You Better You Bet until noon Eastern, leading you right up to Bleck and Abdallah. And it's not just Wild Card Weekend. Do we still call it Super Wild Card Weekend, by the way? Why did we do away with that? Because it sounded silly? I think it is super. That we've got a whole weekend of phenomenal football, whether it's college or NFL, to look forward to. And we're going to get knee-deep into all of it over the next 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's funny how things get made fun of because they sound dumb initially, and you go, Super Wild Card Weekend? What are we doing? And then a little farther down the line, you go, yeah, but you know what? Now that we've made fun of it, maybe it's okay to call it that again. I'm going to call it Super Wild Card Weekend, and we're going to get into absolutely all of it today here on You Better You Bet. Like I said, your comments are welcome in the YouTube chat right now. Search the BetMGM Network, and you'll find You Better You Bet. And coming up, I'm going to tell you exactly why it's the worst offseason possible to be on the hunt for a new head coach, or maybe even worse, a new quarterback. In for Nick Costos on You Better You Bet today. Chris Mack with you here on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
How involved will you be in the general manager hiring process and interview process?
I'm going to be a part of the process, and beyond that, I think the main objective and what everyone's counting on is that we have a cohesive crew of people that are working in the same direction.
Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Mike McDaniel yesterday in his season-ending press conference in Miami talking about he's going to be in on the GM conversations, interviews. I don't know if anybody's told him that. We'll get to more on what's going on in Miami just a second as the game of musical chairs has already started. The Cowboys have fired, it was just announced about 10 minutes ago, defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. And so they'll be on the hunt for a new defensive mind. According to Diana Rossini of The Athletic, one name to watch, Brian Flores. Anytime Brian Flores comes in, people start to go, head coach in waiting. That's a possibility and something we can talk about because I think this NFL offseason cycle, if your team is looking for a coach or a quarterback, is going to be particularly painful. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports. Don't forget to download the Westwood One Sports app and take us with you wherever you're going. That's your key to unlocking coverage of all the NFL. I'm going to call it super wildcard weekend games as well. We'll talk to Derek Rackley, who will be on the call of Patriots-Chargers Sunday night in just about an hour to get his take on everything going on around the NFL playoff picture. But for the teams that aren't involved in the playoffs, this is where things start to get spicy, right? So in Miami in particular, you heard what Mike McDaniel had to say there. He's going to be a part of the process in looking for the new GM. Now, maybe that's just a classic example of the old Bill Parcells axiom, right? If I'm going to cook the meal, I want to shop for the ingredients, right? Shop for the groceries. But is Mike McDaniel necessarily the head coach you trust at that level, given the way things have gone the last couple of years in Miami? I don't know. And apparently there are still people with direct knowledge of this situation who aren't so sure either. Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald reporting last night that according to a source of his with direct knowledge, he said, multiple Dolphins GM candidates have not been told if Mike McDaniel is returning. Oh, what a mess it's becoming. We're 2 days into the offseason, and the Dolphins already aren't all on the same page about how this power dynamic is going to be constructed at the top of the organization. Really? You're not sure? McDaniel thinks he's in on it, but other people haven't told the GM candidates whether he's going to be in on it or not. This is how you end up with multiple mixed messages. This is how you end up with lots of different people wanting to go lots of different directions. This is how you end up in a mess, which the Dolphins have made for themselves the last couple of years. Look, I'm not saying you need to have an all-powerful emperor at the top of the regime who dictates to everyone exactly what's going to happen and doesn't take any feedback. Okay? That's not what we're saying. That can be just as damaging. Looking at you, Jera. But as much as conflicting viewpoints and different perspectives need to be taken into account, you also need to make sure that the public face of what is going on is as close to being on the same page as possible. 2 days into the offseason, which it sounds like may not be the case in Miami. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network also all over things this morning with coaching interview news, coaching candidate news. Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy, who I mentioned off the top of the show, going to interview with the Titans on Thursday, according to Rappaport and Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. They've also got plans to interview Lou Anarumo think tomorrow, it sounds like. And then Kevin Stefanski on Saturday. This is what the NFL game of musical coaching chairs is going to look like this offseason. You are going to be, if your team is looking for that next great up-and-coming head coach, great tactical mind, great leader, everything rolled up into one, he ain't going to get a job this offseason. I'm telling you. It's just, those guys aren't out there. They're not. The Ben Johnsons and Mike McDonalds are not out there this offseason. I hate to break it to you. And so it's highly likely that if your team is looking for a head coach, you're going to be underwhelmed by some sort of retread. Whether, like I said, it's a LaFleur or a Kubiak who just happens to have the same last name as somebody else who you've already heard of. Maybe those are the guys. Maybe I'm underselling the other LaFleur and Clint Kubiak, whose offenses, especially in LA with LaFleur, have had their moments this year. Seattle, JSN and a prayer, many weeks. But you're not. There's not going to be a name that bubbles to the surface that you go, ooh, hadn't heard of this guy. Going to go check out his resume. Oh, okay. It's not going to happen. Now, I guess there is an outside shot. I've heard the name bounced around just a bit about Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator, Hiro Avero. That is a name where you're like, who? Huh? But the Panthers defense at times this year has jumped up and surprised, given the level of talent or lack thereof on that side of the ball. So maybe that's the one name, Avero, to keep an eye on if you're trying to figure out who that next up-and-coming name is. But for the most part, get ready for retread season in the land of head coaching hires in this offseason cycle for the NFL. And while we're at it, I'd argue it's going to be the same regarding quarterbacks, too. Have you looked at what's available out there? I mean, again, Tua Tagovailoa, I'll reference Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald again, who was at Dolphins locker cleanout day yesterday. He was one of a couple of reporters who talked to Tua, and Tagovailoa was asked if he's hoping for a fresh start. And the direct quote was, "That would be dope. I would be good with it." And then it was clarified to him that they meant somewhere else other than Miami, at which point Tua politely declined, according to Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, to speak any more on the subject. I find it hard to believe that Tua didn't know exactly what they were talking about and doesn't know that his days are over in Miami. Is that the quarterback that you want to send draft picks to Miami for, in the hopes that that somehow turns around your quarterback situation in places that desperately need to turn around their quarterback situation and find that guy? Tua has had his moments. Don't get me wrong. What's the record? 34-31 in 4 years? Yeah, you could do worse. You could also do a hell of a lot better, I think. Now, this is what happens in a world where you're desperate for a quarterback. You're desperate for a quarterback. Everybody wants their quarterback now. Got to have my quarterback now, because nothing happens until we get our quarterback now. But Tua ain't the answer. Kyler Murray's not the answer. Kenny Pickett, he'll bring in that ring and show it off to you. Hey, guys, look what I got in Philly. Malik Willis, also from what has now become a massively underwhelming draft class, Pickett and Willis coming out together. When you're desperate for a quarterback, you are going to do dumb things. When you're desperate for a head coach, it's funny, though, teams and organizations just kind of settle into a spot and hope to get it right. They'll do anything they can to get a quarterback. Head coaches, I've heard that name before, sure. Let's bring him in for an interview. Okay, background check clear? Okay, yeah, give him the job. I mean, That's what it comes down to. And again, in this cycle, there's not a lot of great names out there in either regard, head coach or quarterback. I mean, you going to hire Eberflus? No, not even for a coordinator job at this point. And this is how you end up with organizations sort of twisting in the wind. You know, for all of the criticism, and fairly, in a great amount, for all of the criticism that guys like Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh receive for not maintaining a standard that their organizations and their fan bases believe in over the last decade or so, there is something to be said for stability and for consistency of message. Now, when it goes flat, it goes flat. You gotta recognize that and detach yourself from it. Do I doubt that Steve Bisciotti will do that in Baltimore? Yes. He'll get Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson in a room together in the next week or so, have them hash some things out, and they'll go off into 2026 hoping to get it right this time. Same thing could be said for Art Rooney II in Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin. Even if they get scrubbed by the Texans on Monday night, they'll bring them into a room. They'll talk about what went right, what went wrong. And even though the message may be falling flat or stale at times, they'll push forward with consistency, even if it means mediocrity. And this is where you have to ask yourself as a fan, would I rather have the consistent mediocrity? Would I rather have at least 9 wins every year and know that I'm going to be in the conversation in January? Or would I rather bottom out for a year or two, go find the coach, go find the quarterback, and hope we get it right in 3 or 4 years? It's possible. It's possible. It can happen. Even if it takes a second coach like it has in Chicago, even if it takes another quarterback like it's happening in Seattle, you can get there, but it is a long and winding and painful road. And I'm just here to tell you that this offseason in particular, if your team is looking for either and or both of those positions, it could continue to be long and winding and painful. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos on You Better You Bet today here on Westwood One Sports. Don't forget, always available on the SiriusXM app, channel 375 as well. Derek Rackley going to preview those NFL wildcard games with us coming up in about 40 minutes. But coming up next, the definitive rankings of who you should be rooting for if your team isn't in the playoffs. And no, you can't just say Buffalo and walk away from the table. We got to go through this and figure out what makes the most sense for you. That's next here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
looking to throw. Pressure, throws, incomplete. Don't see a flag. Eagles gonna hold on.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
The only loss for the Bills in the last 7 weeks on that failed attempted two-point conversion at the end of the game against the Eagles in a 13-12 loss. It was also their next to last game at Ralph Wilson / Highmark Stadium, which in all likelihood has seen its final game as the Bills enter the playoffs as the 6th seed, but probably the darling of these NFL playoffs for unattached, unaffiliated fans. We'll get to that in just a second. Top of the hour, some breaking news from Ole Miss regarding what their coaching staff is going to look like this week against Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. Is it good news? Is it bad news? Is it just a mess? Well, they push past it anyway because they managed to handle the last month and all the Lane Kiffin nonsense without much of a problem. If you're betting the NBA this season, we talked about Trae Young earlier, crazy Kevin Durant buzzer beater against the Suns last night. Here's something that'll take the pressure off your picks. With today's NBA no sweat token, you don't need to sweat if your bet doesn't hit. You're going to get your stake back in bonus bets up to $1,000. Download the BetMGM app today and get that NBA no sweat token as the sports calendar starts to open up and breathe a little bit, and you get to pay a little bit more attention to the association. Again, if your bet doesn't hit inside the BetMGM app, you'll get your stake back in bonus bets up to $1,000 with that no sweat token. Download the BetMGM app today. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos on You Better You Bet here on Westwood One Sports. You can always take us with you live 24/7 inside the Odyssey app as well, AUDACY. If you're watching the show on the BetMGM network feed on YouTube, drop it in the comments. Who's the team you're rooting for this playoff season? If you're unattached, unaffiliated, if you're a member of one of the 18 fan bases who aren't alive, you're done. Done. Your team is out. You're worried about who the coach is going to be, who the quarterback is going to be, and already thinking draft maybe. Who are the teams that you would like to see go on a run? Who would it be? I've seen folks mention Carolina. We know that's not realistic, right? I can positively say that if my team were not in it, I being a Steelers fan, I'm still clinging to hope that there's something left in Aaron Rodgers' right arm and that defense can carry them, at least past the wild card round. Get Mike Tomlin that elusive playoff win that he hasn't had in nearly a decade. But I understand that Carolina is not realistic. Let's start on the AFC side, right? Let's work our way through the bracket. You tell me which teams you'd root for. If your team's out of it, your opinion especially valuable here. And I'll just run down from the top to the bottom of the bracket that we've got up on the screen. 5-seed Houston Texans. There's a team that could have some Cinderella element to it, right? Did not have a great start to the year. Got hot at the right time. And if it's really going to be a year, like I said earlier, where a defense could win a championship, I mean, could you do worse? No. Could you do better? You could do worse. Phrasing all off, I blew that one. You could probably not do better than Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter. They may terrorize Aaron Rodgers on Monday night and make the old man look like an old man again. The Texans are a team you might be able to get behind. The Steelers, no. Let's be honest. And I say this as a Steelers fan. Nobody outside of Steelers fans wants to see the Steelers go on a run. Nobody wants to see Aaron Rodgers go on a run outside of Steelers fans. And people who absolutely fell in love with Rodgers during his Green Bay years and still hold on to him as their QB. So they're not in the mix, right? The Broncos, the 1 seed, is anybody going out of their way to root for Sean Payton? Ugh. I mean, could the vibes get any ickier? Can't think of a better word. I mean, you see the way he screams at people, the way he interacts with people. I, for one, know that Russell Wilson may not have been a very good quarterback. May not have been. Russell Wilson was not a good quarterback in Denver. But there's something about watching the head coach just emasculate a player on the sidelines that makes me go, come on, man. Maybe it's because I got yelled at a lot like that playing high school football because I stunk. But the Broncos, no. I can't get behind them. The Bills. That's the team that everybody's going to get behind, right? Josh Allen is fun. They've never won one. Sean McDermott might need it to keep his job. That's a team that I think a lot of people are going to get behind. Jags, maybe again, a little bit of a darling factor. Haven't been there before. Trevor Lawrence, maybe some fans of his that have latched onto him. But I don't foresee that going very deep. Chargers, nobody's rooting for John Harbaugh. I'm sorry. Nobody. And like I said earlier, Justin Herbert's playoff track record doesn't give you a great deal of hope, especially now that he's basically held together with duct tape and bubble gum and paper clips, MacGyver style, behind that offensive line. Patriots, is anybody, did I say John Harbaugh? Jim Harbaugh. It doesn't matter. It's a Harbaugh. Nobody's rooting for them. Patriots, is anybody lining up to see the Patriots win another Super Bowl? Other than your cousin from Boston, who's going to be obnoxious if they do. Nah, I'm good. So really the teams on the AFC side that might be the general public darlings, Buffalo's at the top of the list. Maybe a little bit of Houston, maybe a little bit of Jacksonville. On the NFC side, like I said, people are going to always root for the underdog. The Panthers are 10-point dogs to the Rams, and people are trying to convince themselves that there's some sort of possibility that they could pull off the upset. Okay. Probably not. And they're not going on a run even if they do pull off that upset. Chicago, like I said, Ben Johnson is easy to root for. Bears haven't been there in a long time. If you grew up in the 80s like I did, maybe you got a little bit of a nostalgic soft spot for them. Packers, been there, done that. Don't need to see the Cheeseheads get themselves another title. Eagles, sorry, your fans take you out of the mix. Nobody's rooting for the Eagles that isn't just by birthright born into it. Niners, again, been there, done that recently, seen them in the game a couple of times. Love George Kittle. Would love to see CMC play deep into the postseason again. Doesn't especially tug at the heartstrings, right? The Rams, been there, done that. We've seen Stafford go on his run before. It's got to be Seattle. I mean, they're a 1 seed, so it's not really a Cinderella story. But Sam Darnold, you want to root for him to keep it together? And the Seahawks, under Mike McDonald, go on a magical run? I could see that. But I don't see a lot of people lining up to root for anyone other than the Buffalo Bills. If you're not attached, right? If you're not attached to a team and you're convincing yourself that you got to root for somebody over the next 3 or 4 weeks, you're probably rooting for Buffalo from the AFC side for the story, and maybe Seattle or Chicago from the NFC side. Or you hold out some odd level of hope that the Carolina Panthers could actually go on a run. Bears-Patriots. This is a great note from executive producer Bill Zimmerman in the chat. Bears-Patriots on the 40th anniversary of that Super Bowl, the first one I remember watching as a little kid, would be huge. Plus 1 versus 2 in the 2024 draft. It's not a bad call. Coming up, Even a full month removed from Lane Kiffin's departure for Baton Rouge, and with a playoff win under their belt, the Ole Miss coaching drama continues. Breaking news on what's happening with the Rebels assistant coaching staff going into the Fiesta Bowl next.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
It's time to laugh, to win, and to live the thrill of the action.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. What the hell's going on out here?
No idea what's going on, but I am excited.
Every pick, every play, every game-changing moment.
Unbelievable!
This is You Better You Bet, brought to you by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Chris Mack in for Nick Costos on You Better You Bet today here on Westwood One Sports. Thanks for joining us and being a part of the fun. Ole Miss and Indiana, they're not going anywhere, even if some of the Rebels' assistant coaches are. We'll get into that and breaking news about who will be available to Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl this week and beyond in just a moment. 20 minutes from now, Derek Rackley will be on the call for Westwood One's coverage of Patriots-Chargers alongside Tom McCarthy Sunday night in Foxborough, is going to join us to talk all things wild card. Sorry, I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep doing it. Super Wild Card Weekend. I don't care if they don't call it that anymore. In my mind, it is super, and I'm excited for it, so I'm calling it Super Wild Card Weekend. Maybe you're not so excited for it if your team is not in it, and we'll talk about what that offseason cycle could look for those of you amongst those 18 fan bases who are not still involved in what's left of the NFL season or postseason in a little bit more than an hour from now, because I don't think it's particularly pretty. Plus, coming up before the top of the hour, this week in hindsight, where I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen, because I've gone and checked it out already. I'll explain all the details coming up here on Westwood One Sports. But breaking news earlier this morning about Ole Miss, and it has been back and forth with the assistant coaching staff. LSU's administration, it was announced this morning, Heather Dinich and Mark Schleybaugh of ESPN reporting this about 2 hours ago, that they are going to allow offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss Jr. and running backs coach Kevin Smith to continue coaching for Ole Miss through this weekend's Fiesta Bowl college football playoff semifinal against Miami. Now, they're both going to be employed by LSU very shortly. They both were in Baton Rouge yesterday for recruiting visits and are I don't know if they're flying out to Arizona to meet the team there, if they flew back to Oxford last night, and now they're traveling with the team because Ole Miss is scheduled to get out to Arizona today. But they will be there. Keith Carter, Ole Miss AD, said, "Our main focus is on winning this game. Charlie's been awesome, juggling two high-profile jobs. He's been incredible. We have no complaints." There are complaints from members of the Ole Miss NIL collective, including their director, Walker Jones, who said it's unfortunate what's been going on with our players and their former head coach and staff having to deal with the pressure of making future decisions while trying to prepare for a playoff run is not a sustainable model. Well, you're right about that much, but it hasn't seemed to hamstring Ole Miss too much to this point, because there were rumors, speculation that Kiffin and LSU would go right after Kejuan Lacey and Trinidad Chambliss. And maybe they did behind the scenes. Don't know. But both of them have signed new deals to stay at Ole Miss for the 2026 season. Chambliss obviously contingent upon actually getting a waiver from the NCAA for his 6th year of eligibility. As an aside, can we talk about Trinidad Chambliss as if the NCAA does something which would be very NCAA-like and not approve his waiver? Where's that dude enter the mix? If he were to be in the draft this spring, I mean, he's right there with Moore and Mendoza, if not a nose ahead of them, in my opinion. Like, the dude's physical talents have been laid bare for everybody to see over the last 2.5 months. Ole Miss, their offense has been fairly unstoppable since Chambliss was inserted into that role. I mean, that's a guy who looks to me anyway like he's worth a top 5 pick. Mendoza and Moore, I got my questions about. And I think they'll be overdrafted just because, like I said earlier, everybody's in a race to find their quarterback. But again, if Chambliss gets that waiver of eligibility from the NCAA, that part of the discussion will be moot, and he'll be back in Oxford next year, or this year, I guess I should say, in the fall of 2026. Lucas Carnero, I guess, as well, was another target for LSU. Their big-legged kicker. The big leg you got, boy. Had the 56-yarder in the Sugar Bowl. The game-winning 47-yarder as well. But he's coming back. He's also been re-signed. And this is where, let's table the conversation just a second, back burner the conversation about how you fix this whole mess. Because I do think it's a good point, and I will not be the first person to make it, that they need to fix the calendar in college football. So let's back burner that for just a second. And instead, I think the conversation worth having right at this moment is this a changing of the guard somewhat at the elite echelons of college football, specifically in the Big Ten and the SEC? People love the familiar and hate change. So when you become conditioned and accustomed to Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, same teams every year. It's Clemson for a while. They kind of fallen out of that mix. But you like the familiar, right? It's comfortable, especially around the holidays. It's heartwarming. Oh, I watch the same Christmas movies every year. I know the same teams are going to be in the playoff every year. I hate that. I mean, I like the same Christmas movies. That's where I get my sense of nostalgia. And I'm a sucker for nostalgia. But as far as college football goes, we are so long overdue for new blood at the top of the ranks. It's why so many people are enjoying watching what Indiana is doing under Curt Cignetti, turning it around as quickly as he has. Undefeated. And they're not going anywhere. Again, because of the way Curt Cignetti attracts talent, they're not going to go anywhere. Could there be a little speed bump next year? You lose your quarterback? Maybe. But again, because of the portal, you can reload on the fly real quick. And I don't doubt for a second that the second Indiana is done playing this year, and they've probably already started, Cignetti and the Hoosiers will be all over the right amount of talent to try and keep this thing going at Indiana and keep them at the top of the Big Ten. And I love it. I love it. This is why we love March Madness. Because for every Kansas or Duke or UConn, we get a Cinderella story, right? We get a George Mason. We get a Loyola. We get an FAU. Now, those are different. It's not total apples to apples here because those are literally Cinderellas who pop up for a year, maybe two, and then fall back down into their mid-major ranks, right? You don't have mid-majors per se in the CFP picture. You got your group of 5 teams. And people lost their minds over that. Oh my God, why is JMU here? Why is Tulane here? I mean, were Texas or Vandy going to go on a run? Give me the team. Give me the little engine that could, maybe making some noise. Neither one of them did it this year. I'm okay with that. Maybe not 2 teams every year. I'll grant you that. But at least one. And as far as the new blood at the top of the 2 power conferences goes, this is what I want. Why do some people hate that idea existing in college football? Is it because it takes your team out of the conversation or makes it harder for them? Like, if you're in Tuscaloosa, you became conditioned to believing that a spot in the Final Four was just birthright. And now you've gone through a coaching change, and I get it. You probably want to run Kalen DeBoer out because, God forbid, you not win a national title or at least get to the championship game. What is that? What scares you? That Ole Miss is going to become that team in the SEC? I don't know if it's possible or not. I don't know if Pete Golding can keep this going. But again, they brought back a lot of the key talent already. Chambliss, Lacey, Carnero. And that gives me reason to believe and hope that these teams are more than just a flash in the pan. And that they will be hanging around. Isn't that what we want? Don't we want new, fresh faces and storylines? Don't we root for underdogs? I just got done talking a couple minutes ago about the darlings of the NFL playoffs who you might latch on to if your team is not around. And I cited a survey, I saw it, where over 40% of Chiefs fans have said they'll root for the Bills in these playoffs. Again, maybe that's just Big Brother saying, I'm the only one that's allowed to beat up my little brother. But why can't we do that in college football? I heard Bill Ryder say it yesterday when he was filling in for Jim Rome here on Westwood One Sports. Some of us have grown up being taught that you root for the conference once your team is gone. And I'd love to see a Big Ten team. As a Penn State fan, I'd love to see a Big Ten team. A legit Big Ten team. Sorry, Oregon. A legit Big Ten team. All of a sudden rise up the ranks, shock the world, and win a national title. Does it help that Kurt Cignetti's also from my corner of the world? Sure, it helps. Does it help that it's a quote-unquote Cinderella story because they've done it so quickly? Sure, that helps. That doesn't seem to exist in the SEC, though. I mean, that is cutthroat. That is, if I'm out, I'm dragging you down with me, right? And fans in Tuscaloosa and Athens and Baton Rouge, I don't want to see Ole Miss win nothing. If we're not winning, you're not winning. Really? And I don't know if that's out of fear that your team won't elevate itself back up to that spot because that team has taken it at least for 1 year or a couple of years in Indiana's case in the Big Ten. But why we got to think that way? Now, as for the calendar, yes, it needs to be fixed. And this isn't hard to do. This really isn't. You know, we have so much time between these CFP playoff games, particularly the first round of the quarterfinals. And I know a lot of it depends on the calendar and the way it falls, and when's Thanksgiving, and when's Christmas, when's New Year's. It's not hard to just start the playoffs right out of the gate. You get done with the conference championship games next weekend, first round of the playoffs. Following weekend, people are still going to watch Army-Navy. Don't worry. Following weekend, quarterfinals. On campus, by the way, on campus. Pleased with the quarterfinals. It's ludicrous that the top 4 seeds get buys but don't get home games. The 4 best teams in the country, as judged by the committee, and most people who watch the game all year, don't get home games in the playoff at all? Silly. 5, 6, 7, 8 should get home games the week after the conference championships. 1, 2, 3, 4 should get home games the following weekend in the quarterfinals. And then before you know it, we got the semifinals the weekend after Christmas. And we got the national championship the weekend after New Year's Day. And you could still keep some of your bowl tie-ins. So everybody gets their money. The thing gets wrapped up before the first week of January. Your January portal window still exists. Coaching hires can get taken care of. And you relaunch the whole thing come February, right? Everybody officially hits the offseason. Why can we not figure that out? I mean, I know why. It's because there isn't an adult in the room. It's the NCAA. But fix the calendar. And let's stop talking about coaches leaving jobs before the playoff even starts and whether their assistants can fly back and forth from their new jobs to their old jobs to help a team that could be on a Cinderella run through the CFP. Coming up next, Westwood One Sports is your home for play-by-play of the entire super wildcard weekend slate. I'm still calling it that. And we got one of the voices you'll hear on the call of Chargers Patriots. Derek Rackley joins us next here on You Better You Bet. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
3rd and 2. May's got Stevenson. Touchdown. First touchdown pass of the day for Drake May.
Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Joe Davis on the call for Fox the other day. Drake May to Ramondre Stevenson as the Patriots are locked into the 2 seed in the AFC side of the NFL playoff field. And you can hear each and every single one of those games right here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos today on You Better You Bet, with you wherever you may be in the world. Download that Westwood One Sports app. It's great for taking us with you and then also making sure you're plugged in for the games as well, including Sunday night in Foxborough when the Patriots will be hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. He'll be on the call of that game for Westwood One Sports alongside Tom McCarthy on Sunday night. Pleased to be joined by Derek Rackley. Morning, Derek. How are you? Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, you bet. Good morning. Hopefully you're doing well and excited for a big playoff weekend this weekend.
Yeah, I keep calling it Super Wild Card Weekend, even though I know that's not the given nomenclature anymore. I'm going to keep going with it because I think we got some super matchups to look ahead to, including Patriots, Chargers, and we can get into some of those games in just a moment or so. But I've been making the case this morning here, Derek, that every 8 to 10 years, we have one of those postseasons in the NFL, whether it's because of how the bracket falls or injuries to starting quarterbacks or just how things play out, where defense actually wins championships, right? The old adage that our dads and our fathers and our grandfathers told us years ago, defense wins championships. And then we get caught up in a playoff field with names like Brady and Manning and, Rivers, or we get caught up in the modern day field, which is, Mahomes and Burrow and Jackson and Allen. And there aren't a lot of those names remaining in this year's playoff field. So just from a 50,000-foot view, as you look at the way these two fields stack up on each side, AFC and NFC, could this be a year where, without a wealth of big-name quarterbacks with big-game experience, defense could actually win a championship?
I would say could. I don't know if I'm convinced that that's exactly what's going to happen, because as I look at the field, I think about, okay, if you're going to make that comment, who are the legitimate defenses that are in the postseason? I think you'd throw Houston in that conversation. I think you throw Denver in that conversation. I think on a good day, you throw Philadelphia in that conversation because of the talent, the people that they have. But outside of that, and I've seen a good bit of these teams, I'm not sure that there's not a team in here that's like the Ravens from the early 2000s, right? Like there's a team that's just absolutely locked down. So I like where you're going with it. But to me, what you had mentioned is kind of the bigger part of this postseason is that you don't necessarily have quarterbacks or coaches that are proven themselves in this setting yet, right? I think we're looking at a lot of very budding superstars, whether that's coaching candidates or that's quarterbacks. Obviously, one of them going to be the quarterback that I'll have on Sunday night in Drake May. A lot of people think that he is already in that upper echelon, and he's a guy with getting MVP attention this year that could be the next guy. But it's different when you get into the postseason, right? The stakes are higher and everything gets thrown on your shoulders. The thing that we have seen is guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, for the most part, have been able to shoulder that load, not always resulting in a Super Bowl championship, but at least getting to AFC title games. So to me, it's going to be which one of these coaches, a lot of younger coaches getting in the postseason or maybe unproven yet, are able to put together the plan to march them through the postseason and maybe rely on some of these younger, not yet proven quarterbacks that now get themselves into that conversation where they are proven after their performance this year.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The other interesting part of this dynamic as we talk about defenses who might be able to help their quarterbacks along the way through that relative inexperience and towards a Super Bowl run would be that I want to say the top 6 teams in takeaways are all in the playoff field this year. And all of those teams, for the most part, are in situations, I guess I would say, at least 3 or 4 of them are in situations where the defense has been able to help their quarterback out in managing the game by putting them on short fields. You mentioned the Texans already, obviously. The Jaguars are an interesting team in that regard, I think, because they've taken some of the load off of Trevor Lawrence's shoulders, for instance, and said, yeah, here's a short field. We're going to turn the ball over and give you 30 yards to the end zone, for example. The Bears have made their bones that way because statistically, not a great defense, but they turn you over so often, and they don't ask Caleb Williams then because of their strong running game to make too many plays. Is that something, because during the regular season, I think a lot of people go to, well, yeah, that defense is playing well, but it's all based on turnovers. Is that something that can perpetuate itself through the playoffs deep into January, where defenses can continue to steal games via turnovers?
Yeah, I kind of chuckle in the sense that some people might say, well, it's just all based on turnovers. Well, guess what? That's one of the biggest stat categories in all of football. And I don't care what level that you're playing at, is most coaches are going to tell you that it's turnover margin, its ability to run the football or stop the run, its ability to have explosive plays or slow down, minimize explosive plays. And then in the NFL, it gets all down to quarterback play, like which quarterback ends up being that much better than everybody else that wills their team to a victory. So how do you play really good defense? Yeah, it's called takeaways. Now, it's also getting after the quarterback, which we know the Denver Broncos over the last couple of years have been the best in that department. Houston, obviously, with their pass rush, is extremely stingy as well. But that's how you play great defense. You get after the quarterback and you force them to make quicker decisions, or you shut down the amount of time that they have to process information. And that's when mistakes happen. And then do you have the guys that make them pay for those mistakes, that capitalize on those mistakes? So I would say, if we're talking about great defense and, well, yeah, it's all based on turnovers. Yeah, there's a reason why those teams are in the postseason. Generally, the ones that are on that higher side of the turnover margin are going to find themselves in the postseason.
There's an interesting dichotomy, too, I think, between one of the teams that's best at causing turnovers, the Texans, who we've mentioned a couple times already, Derek, and they're going against a quarterback at the end of his career who, at least mentally, is still processing at a good speed. Aaron Rodgers might not have the physical wheels he once did. We saw that on display the other night, but he still has the mental capabilities to diagnose pretty quickly. Is that an example of something that you think may be able to neutralize, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr., and that Texans pass rush, just the ability of Rodgers to diagnose at the line of scrimmage and find out and try to figure out where he wants to go with the ball right at the snap?
Well, I think you could look no further than that Sunday night game, and a couple of the throws that he made in the fourth quarter, I think, is only because of what he has seen throughout his career, his ability to process information, knowing where his matchup is, and then his confidence himself to cut the football loose and take a shot on some of those plays. I was actually talking to somebody yesterday, and I said, oddly enough, the team that's probably the most experience coming into the postseason at the two most important spots is the Pittsburgh Steelers. You think about their head coach and you think about their quarterback, and those two people have probably the most track record, experience, and success in the postseason that you look and you say, well, could they make a run? I don't know. Like you could see Aaron Rodgers, you could see this defense, you could see their run game end up becoming really good in the postseason, and they catch a run at the right time. I don't think that they're the best team entering the postseason, but when you have a quarterback that's an elite processor, and Aaron Rodgers still can throw the football extremely well, even at his age, he has proven throughout the course of this season that he's going to take some chances and it's going to work out in his favor. And if he gets couple of his receivers back too, like, they could be primed for a run. That's the reason why the Steelers went out and got him. They got an experienced quarterback that's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer that has a ton of experience playing in the postseason. And look what happened in Week 18. He helped get them into the tournament, if you will. And then anything can happen.
Derek Rackley with us. He's going to be on Westwood One's call of Patriots-Chargers Sunday night in Foxborough alongside Tom McCarthy. We'll get to that game in a second, Derek. I want to pivot, though, to the other 4-5 matchup on the NFC side, where Carolina, they've done it to the Rams before, right? But can they do it again? I mean, this Rams team, you talk about experienced head coach, right? Been there, done that. Experienced quarterback, future Hall of Famer in Matt Stafford. Whether Devontae Adams is available or not and how available he is, obviously, is a big part of this. On the other side, we talked earlier about how the Panthers under their defensive coordinator, Ahiro Vera, have been able to step up and make plays at times with a level of talent that maybe you wouldn't think they could. Is there a chance? It's 10 point spread on this thing. Not a lot of people believe in the Panthers. But is there a chance they could shock the world and upset the Rams?
I would say yes. And here's the reason why is I've seen the Panthers a couple of times. So in addition to my work with Westwood One Sports, I also do some work with the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm covering them every single week. And so obviously I got a chance to see 2 Carolina games this year against the Atlanta Falcons, which oddly enough, and that's kind of part of the reason why the Panthers are in the postseason, is they beat Atlanta in both of those games, one of those being a 30-0 blowout earlier in the season. But the Panthers needed a Falcons victory over the Saints to get themselves into the postseason. One of the more bizarre ways to back your way into the tournament, albeit they're in the tournament, right? But they're definitely going to have to lean on this defense, and they've got the personnel. They got guys that can take the football away. Derek Brown still is a problem up at the defensive tackle position if he's able to command double teams, get off of those, get into the backfield. And the other thing that I can tell you from my experience with the Falcons is I watched them play the Rams last Monday night, and they beat the Rams. And there was probably not a lot of people thinking the Falcons would beat the Rams. But the reason why Atlanta beat them in that game is they were able to pick off Matthew Stafford 3 times. That game, Matthew Stafford was coming into that game with 519 passes thrown on the season, and he only had 5 interceptions. And he ended up throwing 3 of them against the Atlanta Falcons. So if Carolina can find a way to get to Matthew Stafford, to force him to make a couple of these mistakes, and they can find their way to get the football, that's going to be one of the best ways to beat him. Now, if you let Matthew Stafford stay on schedule and he finds Puka Nacua, and Puka Nacua is doing those things that he's been doing all season. It seems like every time I turn on a television or pull up social media, I'm seeing some miraculous highlight from Puka Nacua in some type of amazing catch that he's making. He's just the guy that just wants it. Like, he wants it more than everybody else does. I don't think you would say that Puka Nacua is the most athletic, the fastest, the most physical, but he might have that it factor more than any other wide receiver in the National Football League. And when he gets rolling, along with Stafford, things can get out of hand really quickly. We've seen this offense score a lot of points, and that could be the case again if those guys are not disrupted early.
Let me keep it on the NFC side for just a second. Can San Francisco continue to survive all the injuries, all the absences on the defensive side? Now, this is the Eagles offense we're talking about. Wildly inconsistent at best. So maybe this is just what the Niners need, just what the doctor ordered. But they got to go on the road to Philly.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be a challenge, but if you think about all the things that happened to San Francisco this year, the fact that they were without their starting quarterback for a large portion of the season, how they were able to weather that storm with Mac Jones, and all of the other injuries of guys that have been in and out of the lineup, it's been pretty amazing. I think I saw somebody ask Kyle Shanahan the other day about, it's like, this is the most proud that you've been of a team, and it was just amazing to how he was able to rip off so many other seasons on how things transpired and how he was proud of them. But it was just almost like, yeah, I'm really proud of this team and what they've done. But I've seen this in the past. That's probably the reason why we're seeing a 49ers team that's still in the position that they are, because they have a head coach that's not only been there before, but still considered one of the most innovative play callers that we have in the National Football League. And if they get McCaffrey going, if they get some production from Kittle, and then you're seeing Purdy end up having some of the efficiency that he's had late in the season, even though not necessarily the last couple games, but we've seen him go on some tears where he can absolutely light up defenses. And even though that personnel from Philadelphia is stingy, you just need to get off to a good start or find a run at some point throughout the game, right? Like maybe Purdy finds a run where he goes 10 for 10 in the second quarter, bleeding into the third quarter, and that's what they need. But they've got the playmakers to do it. And trust me, I'm always in the camp of, when you have one of the best play callers, the Sean McVays, the Kyle Shanahans of the world, you're always going to have a chance.
Who's got the quarterback matchup advantage, you think, in Green Bay, Chicago? I mean, Caleb has done exactly what has been asked of him for the most part this year, and I think Ben Johnson has done a fantastic job of leaning on the run game. Again, people take game managers as a negative, but it's not. Caleb has managed the game fairly well. It feels like Jordan Love may be the quarterback who's the one asked to make a few more plays in this matchup. And I don't know if he's necessarily that much better, in my opinion, that he's the one that can make those plays when called upon against the Bears' opportunistic defense.
Here's what I'll say in that one is that I'm going to give, I would say, okay, play callers, I think you're pretty even in both the play callers, right? I think both Matt LaFleur and Ben Johnson, good play callers. I think supporting cast, probably somewhat similar, although I would say that Josh Jacobs, his fall off the last couple of weeks has been a little bit surprising to me. And I think that hurts Green Bay and I know he's been banged up. He hasn't been 100%, but a lot of people are at this point in the season. But I will also say that I had the Packers a couple of weeks ago against the Ravens, and they got absolutely tore up with injuries in that game. And sometimes it's all about, okay, when does a team have a rash of injuries and when do they get the guys back? And I haven't had a chance, to be quite honest, in all transparency, look at what Green Bay's injury report and who they're going to have available to them. But they ended up getting hammered by Derrick Henry in that game. And it was a very physical game that they lost a bunch of players to injury. Josh Jacobs didn't play well. Of course, Jordan Love was not in that game. So as far as your initial question, I'm still going to give the edge to Jordan Love just because of the experience and the fact that the last couple of weeks with Chicago, even though they had such a great game on Sunday Night Football, we didn't really see the offense in Caleb Williams. I'm going to give the slight advantage to Jordan Love there.
Before we wrap it up and let you run, Derek, I do have to ask, since you'll be on the call Sunday night, Patriots-Chargers, Justin Herbert's playoff track record, not the best. That's probably putting it mildly. But you've got a Harbaugh on the sideline who seemingly always lends a little bit of stability to the proceedings. And even if they get down, even if they turn the ball over a couple times, I would imagine there's still sort of a calm, deep breath on the sideline. And everybody goes, no, we can still do this. On the Patriots sideline, you've got a guy who just continues to prove that he knows how to handle things in Mike Vrabel. And you've got an MVP candidate in second-year quarterback, Drake May. As you get ready to really dive into that one, what are your initial impressions on how Patriots-Chargers may play out on Sunday night?
Yeah, and by the way, I don't want to slight him because Josh McDaniels needs to be in that conversation as one of the best play callers in the NFL as well. I was talking earlier about Shanahan and McVay, but what Josh McDaniels has done, not only from how he has taken Drake May and quite frankly this entire Patriots offense that was not very good a year ago and made them one of the best in the National Football League, and he's doing it both ways. He's got two running backs in the backfield, which I always feel like is a great recipe for success because you're not just putting it all on the quarterback's shoulders. You got Stevenson, you got Henderson that can both give you explosive plays. They can both get into the end zone. So that's obviously a big benefit. But the efficiency and the completion rate of Drake May this year has been absolutely impressive. For a second-year quarterback that had his struggles last year, to lead the league in completion rate and be an MVP candidate. And I had the chance to see him a few weeks ago, oddly enough, when they played on Sunday Night Football against the Ravens as well. And I came away with that game and I was like, whoa, this young player is special right here. Yes, he's got Stephon Diggs, but the rest of the guys are not necessarily wide receivers that you would say, oh, well, it's because he's got X, Y, and Z. No, this is Drake May doing it with Josh McDaniels and his offensive line. They're getting healthy. They got Will Campbell back last week. They got help on the defensive line back last week. So even though you're looking at a much more experienced Justin Herbert, this one, to me, early on, just screams the way that New England finished the season. You feel like they're going to come into this game with a lot of confidence, but you got a lot of players that are somewhat green in this type of setting, and so they're going to have to produce. I listened to something from Mike Vrabel, and he said, the season starts now. It doesn't matter what we've done up to this point. It now matters what you do in the postseason, and that's going to be on the shoulders of Drake May and the rest of the Patriots to prove what they did in the regular season.
Can't wait to listen to you and Tom McCarthy on the call Sunday night here on Westwood One Sports. Derek Rackley joining us here to preview a super wild card weekend. We appreciate it, Derek. Enjoy.
All right, you got it. Sell it. Super wild card weekend.
So we're selling it the whole way. Super. Yeah, going to look forward to listening to Derek and Tom. My wife went and ordered tickets to a stand-up show for Sunday night. So we'll actually be in the car driving back from that, listening to Tom and Derek call that Patriots-Chargers game. I don't know who lets their wife do that. This guy, I guess, apparently. What if my Steelers had played on Sunday night? Could have been an ultimate disaster. Great stuff from Derek there and more that we can talk about. As I've got spoiler alerts for you, okay? I'm going to jump in the 83 DeLorean during the break. I am going to head to, say, Monday night at midnight. And I'm going to come back and tell you exactly what's going to happen this week. This week in hindsight, coming up next, Chris Mack in for Nick Costos on You Better You Bet right here on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Road to get up to 88. Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
I'll be honest, that was tough, but during the break, I went ahead to Monday at midnight, and I got caught up on everything that went on during NFL Super, because I'm going to continue to call it that, Wild Card Weekend. And I'm here to tell you exactly how it's all going to go down. Yes, the 83 DeLorean, the flux capacitor, all of it. It is time to tell you exactly how it's all going to happen this weekend with This Week in Hindsight. Oh, yeah. Sorry, child of the 80s. If we don't include some Huey Lewis, then what the hell are we doing around here? Chris Mack in for Nick Costos on You Better You Bet here on Westwood One Sports. On Sirius XM Channel 375. Always inside your free Odyssey app as well. AUDACY. So, should we go in chronological order with this? I mean, that's the way I did it. For me, it was like 72 hours of football glory. For you, it was just a 5-minute break. But here I am, back and ready to tell you exactly how it's all going to go down on this wild card weekend. Let's start Saturday afternoon, okay? In Charlotte. The Rams, 10-point favorites against the Carolina Panthers. People are struggling to find a way to make it make sense for the Panthers to somehow upset the Rams. It didn't work. I'm sorry. Stafford and Nakua were Stafford and Nakua, and the Panthers were the Panthers. Bryce Young threw a couple of picks. Stafford, 3 touchdowns. The Rams handled things quite easily. Final score was 31-14, so they're moving on. Saturday night was fun because we had an NFC North division rivalry at Soldier Field. Packers-Bears Part 3. And, we talked about this with Derek Rackley a couple minutes ago. I think Jordan Love's going to be asked to do a whole lot more than Caleb Williams is going to be asked to do. That's not a knock, Caleb fans. It's not. But I think Love might be a little rusty. That's exactly what happened. Jordan Love was rusty on Saturday night. And Kyle Monangai had a couple of scores. Chicago ended up winning 28-20. And so they moved on as well. Now, Sunday. Always glorious when you got a triple header of playoff football. Sunday afternoon was nice. I sat down with some wings. Not too hot, not too much sauce. Just right. Sat down with some wings and I watched the Bills and the Jags. And I watched James Cook have a James Cook game. 125 yards, a touchdown. Josh Allen threw a couple as well. There was a pick mixed in, and it got a little sloppy at times with Jacksonville's defense getting after Allen. But Buffalo still won and ended up doing so pretty comfortably, 27-16. Sunday afternoon, I didn't actually go to Philly to watch the game because I value my personal safety and security. But I watched it, and Philly against the Niners, it was a Saquon game. I mean, we got peak Saquon, which we haven't had a lot of this year. Had a touchdown running, a touchdown receiving. Philly beat the Niners 20-17. 20 points, Eagles fans. They were excited. And then Sunday night, as mentioned, I listened to part of it in the car on the way home from that stand-up show I'm going to with my wife. Chargers and the Patriots. Justin Herbert was Justin Herbert in a playoff game. Threw a pick, had a fumble, was recovered by the Patriots deep in Charger territory. That was one of Drake May's 2 touchdown passes, one of which went to Stephon Diggs. The Patriots won 27-17. And then Monday night, I didn't actually go to this game either because I wanted to be sober enough to jump back in the 1983 DeLorean and fly back to present day. So I knew if I went to the game down at Heinz Field, I'll never call it Acrisure Stadium, I would probably have a few ice-cold iron cities and not be capable of driving back time traveling back to tell you exactly what happened. So I took it easy, and I watched the Texans into the Steelers. And the one thing that I don't know if enough people talked about leading up to this game, we all talked about Will Anderson Jr., Daniil Hunter, the Texans pass rush. Aaron Rodgers is 76 years old. Are they going to tee off on him? Well, we didn't take into account DK Metcalf, back from his 2-game suspension, fresh and ready to go. Hottogo. DK Metcalf had 7 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdown catches. And they forced both an interception and a fumble out of C.J. Stroud. T.J. Watt a little closer to 100%, had a big night. Cameron Hayward had another big night. Kyle Duggar on the back end of the defense had the pick. And the Steelers upset the Texans at home on Monday Night Football, where they have not lost since 1991. Final score was 20-16, so a race to 20 in that game, as I expected. And that is this week in hindsight. You feel good about knowing exactly where all of this is going to go now? Now, keep in mind, with time travel, things happen. The fabric of the space-time continuum can be altered. I am not 110% responsible for these results. They're just what I observed during my trip to this coming weekend. Your results may vary. If your flux capacitor stays aroused for more than 4 hours, shut it down, call a doctor, and cease time travel. Okay? But that was this week in hindsight, getting you ready for a super wild card weekend. Coming up, if you, like me, really believe this could be a year where your drunk uncle is right about Chiefs wins championship, son, I got the perfect underdogs for you. That coming up next. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos today here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports. This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
I got a pretty good reason that a couple of teams you may not have thought of could win the Super Bowl. But one team that you've probably already thought of probably makes more sense than all the others. We'll get into that in just a moment here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos today. Thanks again to Derek Rackley for joining us a little bit ago. It brought up a question because we were talking about Derek's career in the chat. He played 116 games in the NFL and is a long snapper for much of it, right? What is the better, do we think, I guess, for long-term health, right? Long-term health. So Derek was a tight end. I thought he had some long snapping experience as well. But back to long snappers for just a second. If you were looking for, I guess, a sort of roster adjacent job in the NFL, like third string quarterback or long snapper, like, let's not forget, you're tucking your head down between your legs and firing a football back there, either, 8 to 15 yards behind you, while large humans fall on top of you. So it's not an easy job. And then if they don't throw you down on the ground or land on top of you, you've got to sprint down the other end of the field and try to tackle somebody. So probably slightly more dangerous than third string quarterback. But long snappers, third string quarterbacks, what's the better gig? Like, long snappers get the special team schedule, right? Special teamers, they dirty little secret. I don't spend a lot of time in the building, okay? Kickers, punters, long snappers, get in, do the work, get out. Third string quarterbacks, you got to sit in meetings with the other quarterbacks. You got to be paying attention. You got to be honed in, watching lots of film. I think if I had to choose, I would choose the life of a long snapper. But life of a third string quarterback, especially if you're not like a young guy trying to prove himself in the league, you're a veteran third string quarterback, it's not bad either. I mean, the most intense things get is running scout team snaps during the week, right? And then it's just ball cap and clipboard time on Sundays, unless all hell breaks loose. You're not going out there and people aren't falling on top of you while your head is between your legs trying to accurately fire a football 15 yards back there to a punter or a holder. I don't know. I think I'd go... I was leaning long snapper, but then I think I come back around to third string quarterback. Although the potential for disaster if you're a third string quarterback and you didn't actually prepare during the week is high. Right? Like, both quarterbacks go down and all of a sudden you get thrown into the mix. Woof, you're in trouble. So I think I'll go third string quarterback. Just because I don't have to fire a ball back between my legs, accurately, by the way, and then sprint 40 yards downfield and try to tackle someone without getting ear-hole blindside blocked by somebody on a punt block team. I really have come around to the idea, as we look at the 14 teams in the NFL playoff field, and again, Derek, when he mentioned this, it flipped a light switch in my head. We tried to discount turnovers somehow when we talk about defenses during the regular season in the NFL. We go, oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, they've won some games and they've looked pretty good, but I mean, it's all because of the turnovers, right? I mean, not for the turnover margin. I mean, what would they really be doing? And isn't that important? I mean, honestly, we discount the impact of turnovers for some reason. But look at the top 5 teams in turnover margin this year in the NFL. They're all in the playoffs. Bears plus 22, Texans 17, Jags 13, Steelers 12, Rams 11. And when you just talk about takeaways, you get those same teams, Bears 33, Jags 31, Texans 29, Steelers 27, Rams 26, but you fold the Seahawks into the mix with 25. Skip over the Falcons and get to the Chargers with 23 takeaways. If you can turn the opposing offense over, if you can force the opposing offense into mistakes, you don't even have to do it at the rate of twice per game. You don't. Now, some of these teams were close. Jacksonville, 31 takeaways, Chicago, 33. But if you just get one key takeaway, I mean, let's rewind to the last game we saw, Sunday night. Lamar Jackson gets a little slippery with the football, pops up in the air, bounces off a couple of guys, and bang, right into TJ Watt's hands for an interception. You can look at a lot of games and look at how turnovers directly affected the outcome. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that because of turnovers, we're destined to have a Bears-Jaguars Super Bowl. No. But I think it's going to be really important. I also think there is the danger that when we talk about teams and defense wins championships, son, which someone's drunk uncle will say to somebody else this weekend during a game, undoubtedly, and they may end up being proven right, that you can become susceptible in a game where you don't force any of those turnovers. I'll acknowledge that, right? Like if the Texans don't get after Aaron Rodgers and force the Steelers into a mistake or two with the football on Monday night, it might be just enough for the Steelers to win a race to 20, which that game should be. When you're good at forcing turnovers, if you have a day where you don't force any, it can come back and bite you on the butt, no doubt. But it's why I look at this year in particular, and I say, okay, we don't have the same boatload of great quarterbacks involved in this year's playoff field that maybe we're accustomed to, right? No Mahomes, no Burrow, no Lamar, heck, not even a Jared Goff involved, okay? Now, that's not to say there aren't great quarterbacks involved. Josh Allen, Matt Stafford, there are even very good quarterbacks involved. Brock Purdy. But I think there is an opportunity this postseason for a defense to step up and force some of those second-tier quarterbacks into making the crucial mistakes that steal a game in the playoffs. I'm looking at you, Justin Herbert. I think that's a distinct possibility. I'm looking at you, Jordan Love. Ye of 3 interceptions in your last playoff appearance. And if that's the case, if you can find a quarterback who is prone to those mistakes in crunch time, going up against a defense who likes to force those mistakes, then that's where the two come together and you start to get the perfect prescription for, in some cases, an upset, in some cases, a mild surprise, or maybe it's the favorite that ends up winning anyway, but they do so not necessarily because of their quarterback. They do it because their defense tortured the opposing quarterback. That's the one thing I would advise, and I'm just a dude with a microphone in front of his face right now. So no one's going to take, no one in any position of power in the NFL is going to take what I'm saying right now and go, oh, I heard that guy on Westwood One Sports earlier today, and he said this thing that made a ton of sense. No, they're not listening to me. But that's what I would advise. To people trying to game plan this weekend, Don't ask, unless your quarterback is Josh Allen or Matt Stafford. Don't ask your quarterback to do too much this weekend. Don't. It's okay to manage a game. Shh, I'm not going to use the term game manager, but it's okay to manage a game. Liam Cohen, Trevor Lawrence. He ain't got to steal the game for you, Liam. Just ask your defense to force a couple of turnovers, and maybe you upset the Bills. Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith, Aaron Rodgers. You ain't got to ask Aaron to throw it 37, 43 times again. All you got to do is rely on your defense and your run game and spot up your receiver for a couple of well-thrown balls down the field. You could say this to most of the teams alive in the playoff field. Even Mike Vrabel, you don't need to ask Drake May to go out and win the game for you, Mike. Let your defense hold serve, lean on the run game, and make sure you don't put Drake May in a position where he's got to throw balls that might get turned over or make terrible decisions. And so while I do keep an eye on, say, a Jacksonville team, that if Josh Allen turns the ball over a couple of times, could have a path towards upsetting the Bills at home this weekend. While I do have an eye on the Texans because of their pass rush, especially against an elder Rodgers and then whoever they may face after that, while I do have an eye on the Bears, who I think could torture Jordan Love into some mistakes this weekend. And then who knows who they face after that? Maybe Jalen Hurts, right? And show up in an NFC championship game. I think there's one team, and those would be the long shots. I mentioned the Bears a week ago when I filled in for Nick on New Year's Eve. I mentioned the Bears that were 9-1 at that point for NFC champions. And so I would keep an eye on the Bears. I would keep an eye on the Jags and the Texans because of their defense's ability to create chaos for the opposing quarterback. But there is one team out of the 14 remaining who admittedly hasn't looked super down the stretch, other than Week 18 when they looked really good against a much inferior opponent, who can force turnovers, can get after the quarterback on defense, has an experienced Super Bowl winning quarterback, and can run the football as well. I hate to be chalky, but the Rams. The Rams got a little bit of everything, don't they? A defense that can harass your quarterback into making mistakes, which I'm sure they'll do against Bryce Young this weekend. Or maybe against Jalen Hurts the week after that, or Sam Darnold, depending on how the bracket falls. They can force the opposing quarterback into making dumb mistakes. And as long as that quarterback doesn't all of a sudden do a 180 like Darnold did in the fourth quarter a few weeks ago, then they should be able to win the game because Stafford's going to be able to do enough. Nakua, the run game. So the Rams still have to be, if you're taking a step back and looking at it logically, and we talked earlier about sort of emotionally what tugs at your heartstrings if you don't have a rooting interest in these playoffs, if your team's already out of it, if you're more worried about head coaching or quarterback roles, and we'll get to those in a couple minutes because it may not be a pretty offseason for those. Who do you root for? And Buffalo feels like the overwhelming America's darling emotional favorite, get them the Super Bowl win that they haven't had in years. Ever. And then, there's your Houstons and your Jacksonvilles and your Carolinas, all the teams that haven't done it before. But Buffalo is the darling, right? We talked about the emotional tug on who you may want to root for. Logically, remove the heart and just rely on the head. It's the Rams. It's the Rams. Even after falling to the 5 seed, it's the Rams. an experienced quarterback, an experienced head coach, a defense that can torture the opposing offense into making mistakes. It's the Rams. Fill in the blank right there on the bottom of the screen. Why the Rams should win the Super Bowl? Best all-around team left of the 14. Their quarterback can win a game. Their defense can win a game. Their run game can win a game. Their head coach can win a game. You add all that up, and that's what you get. I know it's not the long shot you were looking for, but I threw out the Jags and the Texans for you, maybe even the Bears. Coming up, the 2026 NFL offseason game of musical chairs has already started, and some of these chairs ain't got legs. Well, these quarterbacks may not have legs either, or arms for that matter. I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about next. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
How do you feel like you did this year on the job being the head coach of the Lions?
Not good enough. We didn't get in. I mean, we underachieved, so not good. I would give myself a freaking F.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Chris Mack in for Nick Costos here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports. Dan Campbell, a harsh grader without a curve. You don't get into the playoffs, you get a freaking F from his season wrap-up press conference yesterday. Dan Campbell is one of those guys that could afford to have a less than great year, and nobody in Detroit is going to say, get him out of here, he's no good. There are coaches who, despite their lengthy track records, hear that every week, if not every offseason. I'm looking at you, Tomlin and Harbaugh, even though one of you has survived to this weekend. And so I think it's important that even if you are one of those 18 teams who has no more football to look forward to this January, that you take a step back and you try to build some perspective around what happened to you and your team. In Detroit, that's not hard to do because for years it was a barren wasteland and you found your way to not just competitiveness, but contention on an annual basis. So a hiccup this year, you'll survive, even though it stings now. You look at other places. I know in Baltimore, they're going to say, what have you done for me lately, Harbaugh? And look, the guy hasn't been to a Super Bowl in over a decade. And I understand the standard is higher in places like Baltimore and Pittsburgh. But I wonder if you necessarily want to run out and go hire a head coach in this cycle. Because this NFL offseason cycle, if you're looking for a head coach, or a quarterback for that matter, which we can get to in a second. But if you're looking for a head coach, this cycle is, it came up in the back of my throat. That's how bad it is. It's not good. There are no Ben Johnsons or Mike McDonalds out there. There just aren't. And with Jonathan Gannon out in Arizona, Stefanski out in Cleveland, Raheem Morris getting canned in Atlanta Sunday night. You already had openings with the Giants and the Titans. Is there enough coaching talent around out there that isn't a retread that is going to all of a sudden spin things around 180 degrees? I'll tell you a name that I would bring up. And I saw somebody in our chat brought up Lincoln Riley. I wouldn't bring up Lincoln Riley. I tell you a name that I would bring up, even though the place that he works for now has a bottomless pit of money with which to pay him from and keep him around. And even though he's apparently recommitted to that place, even though I guess some people would call their season this year a disappointment, based through no fault of their own and only based on the CFP committee's decision, Marcus Freeman. There's a guy that if you're looking to impact real long-term positive change, that's a guy you take a swing on. You know, it's no surprise when you hear that in some places, maybe like Pittsburgh, that's a name that's been kicked around in lieu of your longtime head coach maybe deciding to walk away. You go out and you get somebody who instantly has the dynamic ability to lead a group and is young enough that if he puts it together, you're locked in with him long term. That's not to say that it's a guarantee it would happen, but I get more excited about the name Marcus Freeman than I do, I don't know, Kubiak, LaFleur. I just told you how great the Rams offense is. I shouldn't knock a LaFleur. Mike, Matt's brother, who's the OC for the Rams. I shouldn't. And I probably shouldn't knock a Kubiak either. Clint, who's Seattle's OC. He's gotten a lot out of Sam Darnold this year. But look at the other retread names that are popping up. Stefanski's going to interview in Nashville. Matt Nagy's already going to interview in Nashville. Okay, so the Titans are going to go down the retread path. That should work out. Brian Flores is being talked about as a possible DC candidate in Dallas. It's going to be hard to look ahead for Shoddy when he's peeking over his shoulder all the time. But I would imagine Flores should get a call or two about head coaching positions. Who else are we talking about in this cycle? Mike McCarthy? Look, if I want to sit down on a bar stool somewhere in Pittsburgh with my guy Mike McCarthy, and we'll both start dropping into our Yinzer accents where we overpronounce all our vowels and smush all the other letters together, and we got a nice cold Iron City sitting on a bar, I'll talk ball with Mike McCarthy all day. But is that the guy? If you're in Arizona, and furthermore, let's just be honest, if you're Mike McCarthy, you want to go out there? Weather's great. What else is going for the organization out there? That's the other part of this that I haven't even brought up to this point, which is, yes, there are not a lot of great names that aren't retreads that are going to get looks in this head coaching cycle. But there's also not a lot of great opportunities. I mean, I just saw a note a couple minutes ago. It's being reported that Matt Ryan, who obviously is on the studio show for CBS right now, is going to go talk to the Falcons about a director of football job. So I guess that's above the GM adjacent. I don't know. But Atlanta is probably the one spot out of all of the openings that exist right now where I'd feel like there's at least some level of positive infrastructure, right? If I'm a head coach candidate, I'm not interested in going to Vegas. Are you kidding me? And be the next one and done out there? No, I'm good. Now, maybe there's a level of attraction because Brady's more involved now. Maybe, but not especially. So I'm not running to Vegas. I'm not super excited about Arizona. Now, again, I understand. If we're talking about up-and-coming assistants who haven't had a head coaching job before, it's not like they're going to look down their nose at any head coaching interview opportunity. But if you're an established guy, like I mentioned McCarthy before, Flores, I would imagine, as much as he probably wants to get back into head coaching rather than being a coordinator, is Brian Flores necessarily hyped to go out to Vegas or Arizona just so he can get back to being a head coach? Or do you sit back, play your part, maybe entertain the Cowboys for a DC job, or stay put in Minnesota and wait for a real opportunity to open up, a quality opportunity, a place where you can have some success and stick? I mean, is anybody running to take the Giants job? Yeah, here you go. Here's a disaster, granted with a young up-and-coming quarterback who a lot of people think could be good. Scatterboo will be healthy again next year. But other than that, here's a job in the number one media market in the world. Have fun. Every time you lose, you're going to be on the back page of the Post. I mean, if you turn it around, you'll be a hero in the greatest city in the world. But if not, you're getting fired every week. And who wants to go to Nashville? Nashville, great city to party. Great city to go with friends and hang out and have fun. And actually, the city itself, and lots of people I've talked to who live there now, love it. But I mean, as far as coaching at the NFL level, you want to go work for Amy Adams Strunk? Nah, I'm good. I mean, we don't talk enough about ownership in Tennessee being maybe some of the worst in the league. Cleveland, obviously, a disaster. Feels like John Mayer's kind of taken his hands off the wheel with the Giants, and they're one of those driverless cars, and the navigation system has crapped out. It's just wandering back and forth, barely staying between the yellow lines. There are some bad organizations out there. The Raiders. I know Brady's in charge now, so maybe that'll turn around. But if you're an established head coach who's waiting for a quality opportunity, that's the one part that we haven't brought up to this point yet. Are you necessarily excited to go to some of these places? And then as far as the quarterback situation goes, if you need one, who are you bringing in? You trading for Tua? Good luck with that. Trading for Kyler Murray? Okay. I mean, just tell me that 10-7 is the goal at best. And maybe I'll live with one of those two options. But not if you really want to build something. If you really want to put the blocks together to put together a championship house. I'm doing it with those guys. Come on. Let's be real. Malik Willis? Nope. I'm good, thanks. Probably a career backup. Maybe holds the fort down for a starter for a few weeks at a time, as we saw in Green Bay this year. Has moments. Kenny Pickett? Can I interest you in a slightly used Kenny Pickett? No, thank you. Been there, done that. And look at what's available in the draft. We assume Trinidad Chambliss is going to get his waiver of eligibility and head back to Ole Miss for the 2026 season. It's really Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore, and then what? Carson Beck? I love Carson Beck, but not as an NFL starter. This is going to be a bad offseason cycle for head coaching hires, finding any sort of novelty in that realm, and finding a quarterback if you don't have one already. And I'll couch all of that by saying this, the only quarterback who might be available, who could rapidly turn your prospects around, especially if you're a team that's been borderline, like 6-winish, and could very quickly turn things into 10 or 11 wins, a division title, and maybe a postseason run. The only quarterback who could do that for you right now, who might be available, Joe Burrow. But you're going to give up 4 first-round picks for that? I would, but are the Bengals dumb enough to do it? The point is this. There have been off seasons in the past where there were quarterbacks available, whether it in the draft or free agency. There were head coaches available that could instantly turn things around, change the culture, take a franchise from, oh my God, you're a disaster, to, oh my God, you figured some things out. Again, Ben Johnson in Chicago, a great example. Mike McDonald in Seattle, great example. But those aren't out there this year. They aren't. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's just, unfortunately, the truth of the matter. Coming up next on You Better You Bet, Chris Mack in for Nick Costos here on Westwood One Sports. We laughed. We cried. We learned some things. We'll get to the best of it with the 3 stars of the day and get ready to wrap up today's edition of You Better You Bet next, right here on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports. Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
What did we learn today? We'll get into it in just a moment here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Costos today. He will be back tomorrow, leading you through the rest of the weekend up to CFP semifinals in the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowl on Thursday and Friday night, as well as a full weekend of super wild card football. I don't care. I'm still calling it super wild card weekend. And that's just the way it's going to be. For those that haven't been paying total attention, some of the news of the day includes Ole Miss assistants being allowed, I guess LSU assistants now, being allowed to coach for Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl. It was announced earlier this morning that Charlie Weiss Jr., the Ole Miss OC, and running backs coach Kevin Smith to continue coaching for them against Miami this week in the Fiesta Bowl. So that came out this morning just before the show got started. And right after the show got started, not a massive surprise here, the Flus is once again on the loose. Matt Eberflus, no longer the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. That was reported by Adam Schefter right around 9 a.m. Eastern this morning. And Diana Rossini of The Athletic very quickly following up that report with a report that Brian Flores may be a name on the board for the Cowboys as they look to hire a future defensive coordinator. Again, I just don't see a lot of originality, creativity, forward thinking, innovation in a ton of these names that are being brought up for jobs around the NFL offseason head coaching cycle. And that's why I think it could be a lot of underwhelming hires, especially in places where you can't afford underwhelming hires. You can't. So don't get your hopes up, I guess is what I'm saying. There is a pretty full NBA slate tonight, including Heat, T-Wolves, just after 8 Eastern. Some of these games, not particularly the prettiest. You got the Cavs on the road at the Pacers, only laying 5.5, though. That's an interesting one. Magic on the road at the Wizards, only laying 7.5. Spurs on the road at the Grizz, only laying 5.5. So perhaps some spots to lay some points and feel pretty good about it. Lakers laying 6.5 in New Orleans at the Pelicans. All spots you might want to dig into a little bit, especially if you're betting on the NBA. And if you're doing that this season, something that'll take the pressure off some of those picks, an NBA no sweat token, and you can get one today inside the BetMGM app. You'll get your stake back if your bet doesn't hit, up to $1,000 in bonus bets. Download the BetMGM app today if you haven't yet. And if you're looking to bet some NBA action, that's the way to do it with that NBA no sweat token. So if your bet doesn't hit, you'll get your stake back in bonus bets up to $1,000 again in the BetMGM app today. Last night we had the Kevin Durant buzzer beater. We had Steve Kerr getting kicked out of a game. It's always funny to me. It doesn't happen often, but it's funny to me to watch anybody else in the Golden State stratosphere lose their temper the way Kerr did last night, because it almost feels like it's become the purview of just Draymond. Like, everyone else is like, chill, relax, it's calm, everything's good. Doesn't matter how bad things could be going, how bad a call could be, as it was last night on a missed goaltending call. Doesn't matter what's going on. Everybody in a Golden State jersey or a Golden State pullover or anywhere up and down the bench is like, all right, it's all good. We're going to just push forward, because they've just allowed Draymond to be the figurehead for anger. It's like, if somebody's mad, you just let Draymond get mad. But it wasn't him last night. It was Steve Kerr absolutely losing his bleep over a missed goaltending call in that one. So it's always amusing to me. One bet I do really like, not NBA related, college football related. The more I think about the Oregon-Indiana matchup, what are we talking about Friday night? We're talking about two teams that are really incredibly strong in the trenches, right? Both of them. I guess Oregon had their issues on the offensive line against Texas Tech, but Texas Tech's front seven is really talented. Not that Indiana's isn't. But the more I look at this game, the more I think we're just going to get good old-fashioned smash mouth Big Ten football. Yeah, I know, Oregon Big Ten adjacent. Not red-blooded, good old-fashioned American Big Ten. Expanded Big Ten, but still Big Ten. And let's be honest, Oregon doesn't mind playing that way, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So as this thing opened at 47.5 at BetMGM, it's ticked down to 46.5. That's a sign to me. My radar goes off just a little bit. Okay, we got a lot of people betting unders. A lot of people doing it early, bringing the number down a point. Those might be the smart ones. Get your bet in early on this one. I'm doing it right now. I'll put my money where my mouth is and say I'm on Oregon, Indiana under the 46.5. That is one bet that I've really thought about today in looking at these two CFP semifinal games in the Fiesta and the Peach Bowls. And I really like. I also don't hate Ole Miss catching 3 and a hook. The staff is still intact for the most part. You got the good news about Lacey and Chambliss coming back, assuming Chambliss gets his eligibility waiver. And this team has just been distracted zero. Upkiss. Nothing distracts them. And if there's one quarterback left that I think I trust to be able to dodge, dip, duck, dive, and dodge the Miami pass rush, it's Trinidad Chambliss. I've been back and forth on this game over and over and over again, and I'll be honest, I may change half a dozen more times before Thursday night. But right now, I'm really intrigued at Ole Miss catching 3 and a hook against Miami. That's too much, I think. This thing should be closer to a pick'em, and you're giving me 3.5. So I like Ole Miss. I'll just level with you. I haven't placed that bet yet, but it's one I'm seriously looking at. I have placed the Indiana-Oregon under 46.5. All right, like I said, we laughed, we cried, we learned some things. The 3 best moments of the show are 3 stars of the day.
3. 4th down in overtime. They bring pressure. Lamson throws. End zone. Caught! Touchdown! Miles Sandstead. Snap, hold, kick. Oh, good! For a national championship!
Montana State winning the FCS title on a Monday night in January in Nashville in overtime. The first ever overtime FCS national championship game. Hey, can we just acknowledge for a second that some average, ordinary-looking, everyday kid from Montana State is running around with the name Taco Dowler? I mean, come on. Taco Dowler. What a name. And what an end to the game. So shout outs to Montana State for winning the FCS national championship in overtime last night against Illinois State. They are our number 3 star of the day. Our number 2 star of the day.
2.
Is that the quarterback that you want to send draft picks to Miami for? Tua has had his moments. Don't get me wrong. What's the record? 34-31 in 4 years? Yeah, you could do worse. You could also do a hell of a lot better, I think. Yeah, I don't think Tua's that guy that you're going to give anything up for. I can't imagine there is a team out there this offseason quarterback replacement cycle who is going to go, yeah, you know what, Miami? Here's some draft picks. I'll take Tua. I'll fix him up. He'll be just right. Sorry. I'm not buying it. So that is number 2 for our 3 stars of the day. Just the fact that, like I've said repeatedly, to go along with the head coaching cycle, I think being underwhelming this offseason, the quarterback cycle is going to be just as underwhelming unless we get something seismic like a Joe Burrow trade. You're going to have to sort through. It's like the $5 DVD bin at Walmart. DVDs aren't even a thing anymore. Why do they still have the $5 DVD bin? You're going to go in there and you're going to find like Dirty Work 2. You didn't even know there was a sequel to Dirty Work. And now you're like, wait, there's a Dirty Work 2? Is that Artie Lang's cousin? Who is it even in this movie? That's what Tua and Kyler and Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis are. They're the $5 DVD bin at Walmart. All right, our number 1 star of the day.
1.
I had the chance to see him a few weeks ago, oddly enough, when they played on Sunday Night Football against the Ravens as well. And I came away with that game and I was like, whoa, this young player is special right here.
That's Derek Rackley of Westwood One. He'll be on the call alongside Tom McCarthy Sunday night in Foxborough of Patriots Chargers. Waxing poetic about Drake May, and I don't blame him. A lot of us have watched Drake May, specifically in that Sunday night game against the Ravens a couple weeks ago that Derek was referencing there, and gone, dang, he might be the dude. It's hard for us, I think, especially those of us whose favorite teams have been burned by the Patriots over the years, to acknowledge that they may already be back. But as our number 1 star of the day, thanks to Derek Rackley, we may have to acknowledge that the Patriots are in fact back, and that it's with a young up-and-coming quarterback. We'll find out Sunday night when, of course, they host the Chargers in their super wild card weekend game. I'm Chris Mack. It has been a joy filling in for Nick Costos today here on You Better You Bet. Got to say thanks to the entire crew. Mike, Dan, Bill, Tyler, Kenny. Shout outs to each and every one of you for keeping me on the rails today. Nick will be back tomorrow, and I will look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Don't forget to take Westwood One Sports with you wherever you're going. Download that Westwood One Sports app, and I'll talk to Yins again soon. Abdallah and Black up next here on Westwood One Sports.
That was You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.